Hello, welcome to this video. Now, the hardest thing about this, being a YouTuber, this job I've got now, here, doing this, the hardest thing is coming up with ideas. How many videos have I made now? 700, is it? And I have to keep coming up with ideas. Now, at some point, I know that 3 or 4 years down there's a whole ton of videos. I'm going to redo them. I don't think anyone watches them anymore. And I was rubbish back then. I really was. I hadn't got the skills. I've developed the skills. And I feel like I'm a better YouTuber than I was back then. So eventually I'm going to go back. But I haven't done that yet, but it will happen, I promise you. So long-term viewers are going, oh, no, he's not ranking Weather Report again. Yeah, I'm going to do it again. I am going to do it again. I might stick with the rankings I would, and I might redo them. I don't know what would be best to do. But I'm going to do them again. And the old videos are rubbish, you know. They really are. God knows how I got all these subscribers. And there was one point with my videos where, I know I'm not technically great with the camera work and the sound and all that, but I know that. But there was one point where I really hadn't got the lighting right. Every single video looks like it's been filmed in a power cut. So I'm going to go back and, redo those. But you didn't come here, did you, to hear me talking shop? You came here to see me rank the genres, the styles. I'm going to rank on this video the styles, the genres, from 10 to 1. So this is the styles of music that I like best, right? Which is going to be the top. What's my favourite style of music? Is it prog? Is it rock? Is it jazz rock fusion? What is it? Or maybe it's reggae or something like that. Maybe I'm a secret ska fan, and all I listen to when you're not here is like the specials and madness. Who knows? Or maybe I'm into dubstep or even grime. Or maybe I'm a secret Swiftie. Do I look like a secret Swiftie? I've got to be honest. I sat down. My friend Bern Powers made 2 incredible videos on Taylor Swift. I'm going to put the links in here, actually, so I must remind myself to do that because they're fantastic. And I watched them. And at a couple of moments, I was moved to tears. Not by his video, but what he was describing and what he was getting into, the way he was explaining the phenomenon of Taylor Swift. And I started to get it, and I realised how brilliant she is. And it's brilliant in a way that is completely unlike all the music I like, because I'm an old man. Very interesting. And I might have Bern on here, actually. So, Bern, if you're watching this, come on and talk about Taylor Swift, because I fancy doing a video on Taylor Swift. And I would love to talk to you about it. That's incredible. But, of course, her style of music, what would you call that? It's sort of like middle-of-the-road pop music, isn't it? It's like, for 15-year-old girls, is that what it is? Princess music, what would you call it? I don't know. That's the style of music. I don't like that style of music, so I don't listen to Taylor Swift. All right? But there's something to be gained. I could see something that was great about her. What was great about it was the way she interacts with her fans. That's magical. I don't want to sit here, because I'm going to lose viewers. I know you're sweet. And I've come here to find out what styles you like. Anyway, as I started off the beginning of this video saying, it's tough coming up with ideas. So the other day, I was there putting random ideas down on my computer. The 10 greatest bands that begin with T. That's not bad. I could do the whole alphabet, couldn't I? Couldn't you? That would be. That's a whole bunch of videos. People are going to tune into that. The bunch of idiots. I'll just start with A though, wouldn't I? That's going to be AC/DC in it. So I've sat there like that, having to think like that. Aerosmith, I don't know. America, no way. Anvil. Average White Band. Oh, you see, this. I'm going to have to do this one. If you want to see the alphabet of rock, maybe I do the alphabet of rock. I can't get going on this because the thing about this video, it's about styles, right? And that's key. That's key. Here, I jump around the styles. You lot like prog. Some of you like jazz rock. There's a few of you who doesn't like any of these. You just like the fact that I'm off my head and I'm silly, and you like the sense of humour, and you probably like a bit of the stuff that's more about classic rock, or when I talk about something you like, maybe rap or something like that. I don't know. And underlying all of this is the disgusting spectre of elitist jazz, isn't it? You know, and all you rock guys, oh, not jazz again. Is Andy talking about jazz again? And now he's not going to start arguing about race, is he? And then all those people are going to come in and they're all going to be fighting in the comments. All this stuff, it's all about styles, you see, because styles are just like, they're big fences that we put up in music just so we can sell stuff. Anyway, so I was sat there on my computer coming up with some ideas, and my daughter came in and she disturbed me, and I said, please do not talk to me when I'm working on YouTube stuff. Go away. And she goes, what are you doing, Dad? And I said, well, I'm trying to come up with ideas. And she turned around and said, why don't you just do the 10 greatest styles? And I was like, don't be so silly. I'm a professional YouTuber. You're a kid. You don't know it. No, that's not so bad. That is not so bad. So here we are. This is my daughter's idea. I am going to do the 10, my 10 favourite styles, but I'm ranking this objective. So these are these certain styles are just better than other styles. You've got to understand that. We all think it really, don't we? We all think it really, don't we? You know, and there's such an elite, it's the styles, it's not the artist, it's the styles that brings out the elitism. So what I've done is I wrote down all the styles I like. I'm not a massive country and western fan. There's certain country I like Willie Nelson. I love Dolly Parton. I love Dolly. I can listen to Hank Williams. I can listen to Jimmy Rogers because I love the history. I love to appreciate the history of the music. So there's a lot of country music I love. But I wouldn't say I was a country music fan. Reggae, quite like reggae. It's all right. I was in a reggae band many years ago. And I had to leave it. It was a bunch of Rastafarians and then me on drums. 21 years old, white middle-class kid. And I just couldn't understand what they were saying. They kept talking to me and it was all like natty this and natty that. And I just couldn't understand what they were talking about. And all the songs sounded the same to me. So I had to leave. They were called Capital Letters, this reggae band was. So reggae's not on there. Country western's not on there. You know, dubstep's not on there. Grime's not on there. Right? There's a whole bunch of styles. So I wrote all the styles I do listen to. And then I rank them. And that's what you're about to hear now. And what I'm going to do, I've decided, with each style, I'll talk a bit about the style, and then I'm going to pick one artist that goes with that style. Like the one I would go for to represent that style. Now, this does omit certain artists that tend to be in between styles that I absolutely love. Right? And I'll try and talk about that as we go. This is a good one. This is going to be a good one. I'm ready for this now. This is going to be really good. I'm enjoying this. And this, I've never done anything like this before. This is really cool. So, let's start at number 10. At number 10, I've got a style which I have called Acoustic Songwriter. Now, I have my acoustic guitar here. All right? Now, as you know, I tend to have a little bit of a disdain for acoustic songwriters, right? I love Joni Mitchell. I love Nick Drake. I love all those. I absolutely love them, and I listen to them, and I love them. But there's something I can't stand about someone going, I walk in the woods, I see all the trees, I look at the birds, their little knees, and I wonder why it's so nice in the wood. That thing, right? And I've taken the mickey about on this channel, and I'm going to come back and do more of that. I'm going to do more of that because it's so easy to do. Now, I know my songs are rubbish, right? I know there's the same hackneyed chords and me just singing anything as long as it rhymes. But there's so much acoustic songwriter stuff that is like that. It's just, I'm trying to make you laugh and they're trying to make you depressed. And that's even worse, isn't it? It's worse. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with acoustic songwriting. I think it's pretentious. Don't think prog is pretentious. I think acoustic songwriting. But I love Joni Mitchell. I love Tim Harding. I love the other Tim Buckley. There's a whole bunch of acoustic songwriters I absolutely love. And when they're good, what they're doing is ridiculous. You know, trying to play the guitar properly and sing at the same time is incredible. So that's what I've got at number 10. It's acoustic songwriter. Now, who would I have? Now, I thought straight away Joni Mitchell. For me, Joni Mitchell is one of the absolute giants of music. And I absolutely love Joni Mitchell. But the one guy that seems to be an acoustic songwriter that traverses into my world is not... It's not Van Morrison, definitely not him. It's not Nick Drake or any of those guys. It's John Martin. John Martin is a virtuoso sort of folk guitar player. He's a very strong songwriter. There is a pathos, but also a love of life all wrapped up in his songwriting. But there's a way that he plays which enables him to sort of traverse into sort of jazz and even prog. I mean, One World is one of the great progressive rock albums of all time, isn't it? A mad, swirling, psychedelic mess, which is like a sort of cross between Fairport Convention and Hawkwind. With a bit of Miles Davis as well in there, a bit of 70s funky Miles Davis. Incredible album. But albums like Solid Air and Bless the Weather, they're some of my favourite albums. And when I listen to those albums, I don't feel like I'm trying. Even with Joni Mitchell, I have to try. I have to focus and try. Because my ear is not tuned. And when I was young, I hated Joni Mitchell. I thought her voice was shrill. And I just didn't get it until I started to listen to the lyrics. But with John Martin, I could quite easily put a John Martin album and not listen to the lyrics. I'm still going to really enjoy it. But when I listen to his lyrics, they seem so straight and honest. This is a guy that is a bit of a rapscallion. This is a guy that is a bit of a loser in a way. And a drunk, a party animal, but also very sensitive. He embodies what I think makes art great, which is where you have the visceral and this sort of this idea of perfection, order and chaos. John Martin puts those together brilliant. And so I often wonder, I always have a feeling that he's not rated in the same as like a Bob Dylan or a Joni Mitchell or a Phil Ox or any of these greats that people go on about their, you know, absolute brilliant songwriters, all that. I feel like John Martin's not valued like that. And I think it's because people sniff the virtuosity. Anyway, that's what I've got at number 10 is John Martin and the style of acoustic songwriter. Some guy with an acoustic guitar singing about birds and their needs. Number 9, I have what I would call rap, but what people now seem to call hip hop. When I was a kid, it was called rap, but now it's called hip hop. Rap and hip hop is disliked by the viewers of this channel, right? I know that, but I'm a huge rap and hip hop fan. Okay, and I'm going to tell you the story of that. When I came up in the 1980s, I was into prog and jazz fusion and rock and all that type of stuff. And I was your classic guy that wasn't going to like rap. And at that time, a lot of the rap that was in the charts, like Run DMC, and I remember the first rap track I really remember was Buggin' by Whistle. Right, and it seemed like a fun style of music, but it was quite groovy, and I always liked funky groovy stuff, and I love Parliament Funkadelic and all that, but it was all a bit of a joke, wasn't it, you know? So I discounted it. I don't like any of this. By the mid-80s, I had fallen into the trap of buying very expensive albums by GRP, you know, on import, you know, to listen to the virtuosity of Vinnie Colaiuta or John Patitucci or Dave Grusin. I'd become the worst thing in the world, you know. I was only listening to it because, it's easy listening crap, and I thought I was sophisticated for listening to this crud. I was also listening to a lot of straight jazz and ECM jazz. I'd become a jazz snob, basically. So I'm in my bedroom, and I'm listening to probably, I don't know, something awful, a Lee Ritner album or something like that. So I got my Lee Ritner on. And my brother has bought, it's just come out, the second Public Enemy album. Now, to be fair, that wasn't the album. He bought, I've got it here somewhere, I should have pulled it out, It was called the Def Jam Sampler. And it had everybody, LL Cool J, Public Enemy on. And he bought that, and he'd heard some of the tracks off the first Public Enemy album. So he had gone out and bought the second Public Enemy album, which is called Yo Bum Rush the Show, I think. And then the third one was Fear of a Black Planet, wasn't it? I think that's the order. So I'm sat there listening to Lee Ritenour or whatever it was, and he's got Public, and I'm thinking, this sounds like noise. It sounds like a riot's going on with people shouting over the top. And is that a Slayer riff I can hear? And they're quite funny, and the guy seems to be like preaching that it's not a joke. He's being very serious, and I suddenly realised that I was the idiot. I realised I got it wrong. I realised that everything that I was criticising and putting the barrier up was why it was brilliant. And so when my brother wasn't there, I went and grabbed that record. And then when he got Fear of a Blank Planet, I went and grabbed that one as well. And then I started to buy them myself. Public Enemy is the band that represents rap for me, because it was the band that sold rap to me. I also started to get interested in the funky side of rap, because at that time, rap was moving into this sort of gangstery, sort of NWA, Ice-T world. But you also had bands like, Arrested Development that were going into this much more sort of wholesome rap. And out of that became some incredible, sort of almost like jazz crossover acts like Guru and the Stolen Moments, Red Hot and Cool album, Michelle Ndegeocello, Brand Nubian, Diggable Planets. And this, I was heavily into all this type of stuff. Now, when I started to work in the industry, which was about 10 years later, 12 years later, I was making dance music, and we were doing remixes of like Anthony Braxton and stuff like that. A lot of rhythm and blues, R&B type of pop music I was having to listen to, and there was a big garage thing going on. And the garage started off as a vocal thing, and then rappers started to come in, and you had like people like More Fire Crew and So Solid Crew. I can't remember them all now. That's about all I can pull up. But the rap became very important, and I got paid by an organisation called Punch Records, who were getting arts money to try and support young black urban rappers. So I started to produce. Like, I would go into these youth clubs, and these kids are coming, and this is the cutting edge. These kids are listening to pirate radio. They're on the cutting edge of the emerging British hip-hop scene. Everyone's still rapping in American accents back then, but that was the beginning of it. And I could produce around about 10 tracks a day. I would literally turn up to a youth club or some little studio somewhere and sit in there, and they just bring these guys in, and I'll be working on backing tracks like mad. And then they come in, and I'd put the rap down, and then I'd press it onto CD and give them the CD. They'd go off and play it on pirate radio. And then because I was doing that, I started to get actual proper production jobs. And at one point, somebody rings up and said, there's a band in Birmingham, and they're rapping, but it's completely unlike anybody else. It's like British rap. And this band were called The Streets. And The Streets back then wasn't Mike Skinner. It was a whole bunch of people. And a management company I knew grabbed some of the rappers, which seems like a logical thing to do, because Mike Skinner was not the rapper. They grabbed the rappers, and I was put in to produce with them, and we tried to get a deal. We didn't quite get it. Those guys were very open-minded rappers. They were listening. I can remember them coming around to my house and looking at my CDs and going, "Oh, you into Soundgarden? We love Soundgarden." And they actually created this idea of British rap by hearing Ian Dury and most prominently Blur, Park Life. When Blur did Park Life, these guys went, this is like rap, but it's not. And then The Streets emerged, not the guys I was working with, but Mike then, he signed a deal, brought that album out. I had a copy of that album before it came out. I remember hearing it and going, my God, this is going to change everything. And that laid the groundwork for the UK hip-hop scene. Then you had Dizzy Rascal, now we've got Stormzy and all that type of stuff. So I've worked very closely with rap, but the band that I would pick to represent rap for me is Public Enemy. Now, for those of you who are going, it's a load of rubbish, you don't understand what hip-hop is. Hip-hop is like an alternative skill set. It's a little bit like jazz. It emerges in the 70s, and it's an alternative skill set, and it contains rapping, which means freestyle rapping. It contains break dancing, so it's got dance in there. There's graffiti art in there, and then there's turntablism in there. And those are all skills, and you can battle with those skills. And the best of them have a level of virtuosity which is equal to anything that you would get, say, in the jazz world or the progressive rock world. And when we go back to rappers, I've worked with rappers that could come in, and you could grab like 10 objects and just line them up. And then they will start rapping about those objects, right? But not only will they rap, the things that are going on, and if you pull faces or try and have a go, they're going to get you at the same time. Their verbal skills are absolutely incredible. One of the things I have to do here on the YouTube is come out and talk. And I've had to learn how to be able to just keep talking and don't get stumped and go, oh, what am I going to say? And it happens. I get lost. You'll see me. And part of the fun with my videos is watching me surf over the wave of the video to see if I can keep talking, because I don't plan anything. I haven't got an idea what I'm about to say. And part of that was influenced by working with these freestyle rappers and then telling me the techniques that they use to keep going. It's a very interesting thing. So that's what I got at number 9, is rap, represented by Public Enemy. So here you'll get a photograph that represents the style. So you got John Martin, now it's Public Enemy. And you know who you're going to have next for the next style? Well, the next style, I don't know what to call it. I've called it 90s post-dance and electronic music. So when the big dance thing happened in the late 80s, and you had all that, you know, house music turned into techno, and then you had rave here in the UK, and then you got like jungle and drum and bass came out, and then you had all that sort of the mellow stuff that started to come out, and suddenly this new music scene seemed to just explode. And it was affecting absolutely everything. You'd had Nirvana, but here in the UK, we had this band Censor, and they were like somewhere between Nirvana and Public Enemy. Radiohead are like this sort of, you know, doomy indie band. And then suddenly they're sounding like stuff on Warp Records. And then there's artists coming out that are just like incredible, like Goldie, Portishead, Massive Attack, Lamb. So many of them. What's his name from Bristol? Tricky. Oh, what a guy. And this became epic. People like Ronnie Size, they're bringing out double albums. They're like these massive, it's like Dark Side of the Moon all over again. Goldie comes out with Timeless, and Timeless is 20 minutes long. And you have to sit down. It's not about being in a club and doing all this. You have to sit down with Timeless. You have to put it on, right? Usually most people are going to be a little bit inebriated in some way. I don't know if inebriated is the right word, but they're going to be slightly altered, and then they're going to sit down and you're going to put on Timeless, and it's going to take you from that big sort of ambient sound and then that soulful vocal going in, and then 10 minutes later you're trapped in a mathematical world of spinning beats. It's prog. It's absolute prog. The orb were prog. Right? The orb were prog. And then you had people like Ortekra, and you had Aphex Twin. I was in my early 20s. I'd grown up listening to jazz and prog, and I'd done all that. As soon as I've sort to put my tentative steps into the music world, and I'm playing, and I play the drums, but this is going on, and it's influencing everybody, and it's absolutely incredible, right? And then working with jazz musicians, and jazz musicians bringing those elements. It was just like another prog renaissance in the early 90s. People having hit records with records that you never would have thought would have got to into the charts. There's one guy within all this that is like, it's just the heaviest thing there is, and that's who's going to represent this for me, and it is of course Square Pusher. Square Pusher was a virtuoso musician, very good drummer, and a brilliant bass player in the style of Jaco Pastorius. And in the mid-90s, with not much work to do, he decides to make a drum and bass album. He hasn't got a computer. He's got a drum machine, a sampler. I think that's all we've got. And he starts to load playing into the sampler, create these drum beats, and he brings out an album called Feed Me Weird Things. Oh my God, this is just something else. It's just something else. Some of my favourite albums. And then he followed it up with Hard Normal Daddy. A few years later, he brought out like the sort of bitches brew of this 90s post-electronic dance scene, which as music is rotted one note. and Square Pusher is as heavy as it gets. He is absolutely worshipped. I was in a Police tribute band around about this time with a guy called Alex Thomas. Fantastic drummer, one of my favourite drummers of all time. Incredible open-handed drummer. So Alex, I don't know if you'll see this, but I'm saying really a big influence on me and a brilliant drummer. And Alex was playing in all these covers band whilst I was playing in Robert Plant. And then when I stopped and I had to go back to the covers band, he got the gig with Badly Drawn Boy. And then by playing with Badly Drawn Boy, he then made friends and got contacts. And one day he rings me up and he's been with Radiohead. And Radiohead's turned around and said, our mate Square Pusher needs a drummer. And I don't think Alex really knew Square Pusher that well, but he knew I liked him. And he rang me up and said, do you think I should take it? Because he'd been offered some pop band as well. And I said, you got to take Square Pusher. And so Alex went off doing the Square Pusher gig. Incredible. I was very close to it. I was working with it. I worked with people at the time that were involved in some of these bands. You know, I was involved in the sort of Bhangra Indian music crossover, the sounds of the Asian underground, all that thing. I was on the edges of that. So a very exciting time for me. So that's what I got at number 8, is the 90s post electronica dance, whatever you want to call that. That needs a name. With Square Pusher. You got Square Pusher there. Now we're going to swap Square Pusher for somebody else. We're going to swap Square Pusher for some group that's going to represent pop music. Now look, I've got pop music at number 7. I love pop music, right? I love pop music. And when pop music is great, there's an immediacy, a joy, which no other music possesses. It's pop music is pop music. It's immediate, and you listen to it and you go, oh, I love this. This is making me happy. I'm driving along in my car and it's a sunny day and this is playing on the radio and it's absolutely great. And I find I have to be in a certain mood for pop music. I'm not always in that mood, but if I am in that mood, or virtually any pop music will do. A lot of modern pop music doesn't do it for me, I'm afraid. I find that pop music's changed, and I really wish I could put my finger on what it is that's where it's changed. It seems to not have the joy that pop music once had. I could put on a Spice Girls album. I could sit and listen to Tell Me What You Want, What You Really Want. And there's a level, there's some part of me that quite enjoys it. I quite like it. I've always liked pop music. Now, when I thought I'm going to put pop music on the list, I thought, who am I going to have to represent pop music? And my initial gut feeling was Michael Jackson, who is the sort of Mozart of pop music, isn't he? And maybe he should be there. But I wanted to give a shout out to a band which is pop music out and out, but has its roots in jazz rock fusion. Because I think a lot of the really incredible pop music that happened in the late 70s, early 80s in America had its roots in jazz rock fusion. So what I've got up here is Earth, Wind and Fire. Earth, Wind and Fire make out and out pop records, right? Without a doubt, there is nothing that is not pop about those records. But when you go into them and listen to them, they're so unbelievably sophisticated. The songwriting is so incredible. And people can go on about ABBA and all these types of things. ABBA's great and all that type of stuff. But for me, Earth, Wind and Fire, if you listen to something like September or Fantasy or Boogie Wonderland, this is just utter genius, absolute genius. So that's what I've got at number 7. I feel like I should get a bit faster because we're coming up to half an hour and I'm only at number 7. And I don't want to go an hour on this, do I? So I'm going to go a little bit faster. So at number 6, I've got heavy metal, right? The first music I really liked, the first thing that got me into music was heavy metal. How many times have I said this on this channel over and over again? I absolutely love heavy metal. I am a sucker for a heavy riff, right? If it's a cool riff, I like it, right? Who does good riffs? AC/DC do good riffs, don't they? Zeppelin do good riffs. Soundgarden, Riffmeisters. Metallica, incredible. I love all this stuff. If you take an album, say like Audio Slave's first album, Chris Cornell with the Rage Against the Machine guys, I can put that on and it's the riff's so strong, the production's so in your face, the drum sounds are so big, the guitar sounds are so interesting, it's so brilliant. Chris Cornell's voice is off the scale. And it is so monumental that it will make my hair stand on end. Audio Slave. I never say this on the channel. This is why I was looking forward to doing this. Most great metal, except again, for a lot of modern metal, which to me sounds, again, joyless, soulless. It's the computers that's ruined everything. And nothing's been ruined more than heavy metal by the computers. It's just destroyed it. It's just turned it into a load of mathematical nonsense. Who am I going to have to represent heavy metal? I had a big think about it. And for me, there is only one band, and it's Black Sabbath. They invented the bloody genre. Bottom line. They invented the genre. And Sabbath are interesting because everything that we associate with metal now in terms of sound, great big clicky bass drums, great big cannon-like snare drums, huge, heavy guitar right up in your face, screaming vocals, plectrum, funky, intense bass playing, all the things that we associate, Sabbath doesn't do. They've only got one guitarist, it's Tony Iommi. And his guitar sound isn't massively overdriven. It's down-tuned, right? And because he's got them plastic fingers, it's got a certain sound, which no other guitarist has got. The drums, a lot of the times, which are the early albums, it sounds like a jazz drum kit, and it sounds like it's been recorded in the room next door. Ozzy Osbourne is just not a heavy metal singer, but he personifies heavy metal. If you go see any other heavy metal band, the guy's walking around scowling, looking mean and moody, and all that stuff. Ozzy's not like that. You watch Ozzy Osbourne on stage, he's walking around a big smile and he's like, clapping. I love it. I know what I'm doing. Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's Ozzy. And that voice. He's a soul blues singer on that first album, right? But he adapts it. He adapts it because he wants to sound evil, doesn't he? Generals gathered in their masses. No one else sings like that. Sabbath are their own thing. And to me, there's a heaviness with Sabbath which no other band has ever beaten, because the heaviness is not in it being loud or fast or anything like that. The heaviness comes from Birmingham. It comes from where I live. I could drive now to certain places where the industry is still heavy enough to walk around, and you can walk around and hear the people bloody walking. What much you going to get bacon sandwiches in a bit? Yeah, I'm bloody really hungry. I'm clam jiff, I am. Oh, fancy bacon sandwich. Should we go down? I mean, it's like, that's what heavy metal is. It's Black Sabbath. I love metal. But there's one style of music I love a little bit more than heavy metal. And I've got it at number 5. It's classic rock or hard rock or heavy rock, right? I grew up listening to heavy metal, new wave of British heavy metal. But when I started to hear bands like Deep Purple, Free, Black Sabbath, Lynyrd Skynyrd, all these bands that I started to hear that seem to be allied, almost like they'd come before, I love those bands even more. I mean, Led Zeppelin could well be my favourite band. I think I could go off with all the Led Zepp albums, and I'd be happy. When I really am stuck for something to listen to, so I'm going, I don't want it to Weather Report or about some Keisha. Oh, that's too heavy. That is. Oh, should we go for some prog? King Crimson. Oh, I've heard it over and over again. What about Lizard? Oh, you don't like Lizard, don't you? And then I'll see a Led Zepp album. Led Zepp 4, any of them, except for in Through the Outdoor. And if I put that on in my car, that's not leaving. It's just not leaving for weeks. Led Zepp 4, I don't know what it is about that album, but I can put it on and it astonishes me all the way through. It's almost like magical. It's almost like you cannot believe that these people made this music, that the kids that were like 20, 21, 22 went into a recording studio, probably got a bit drunk, run around, acting like kids, climbing up things, jumping off things, and every now and then going in and putting a few wrists down, What should we do today, huh? Do you want to jam on some rock and roll? Yeah, let's still jam on some rock and roll then. Come on then. What should we call this track? Well, let's just call it rock and roll, because that's what it is, isn't it? Okay then. I haven't done this for ages. Haven't you? No. Remember in the old days, we always used to jam on Eddie Cochran stuff and all that, Well, it's bloody brilliant, yeah. So it's been a long time since I rock and rolled. It's been a long time since I did the stroll. I mean, that Led Zepp 4, that's a comedy track, rock and roll is. Zeppelin did it. They were one of those bands that on every album they would do something like Jamaica, perhaps. You know, there's always something a bit silly, isn't there? Hot Dog, you know. They always wanted to return to their roots, didn't they? Their rock and roll roots, but they had to do it with their little bit of a tongue in their cheek. That's what rock and roll is, but the album's become so iconic that you can't hear it like that. Every single bit of it. You know, that from that John Bonham intro to that John Bonham drum solo at the end. Battle Arm, I love Led Zeppelin and I love Deep Purple. I love Lynyrd Skynyrd. I love Free. I think Free, we've got to look after Free because they're probably the best of the lot. And they're getting forgotten. They were a greater band than all the other ones I just mentioned. They were the perfect band. Absolutely incredible. But in the end, what have I put up here? It's Led Zeppelin, isn't it? That's why I got number 5. Now, you're probably going to hate me for this because at number 4, I have got progressive rock. Now, this channel's built upon progressive rock, all right? And that is the big dilemma I have. I love prog, but there's 3 styles of music I listen to a lot more, and you probably know what they are. Prog is at 4th place. This is why I've never gone down to the depths of listening to Le Orme, you know, or bloody Van de Graaff Generator and all this stuff. You know, there's prog guys on here and they've got everything because that's what they listen to. That's what they like. And they got records that go all, you know, they go all around the house. They got absolutely, they can pull everything out. I'm not like that. I liked prog for about 2 years in the 1980s, and then I discovered jazz, rock, fusion, and jazz, and I stopped listening to it. And then in the early to mid 2000s, I thought, oh, I haven't listened to Yes for a while, and I put Yes on, and it blew me away. I heard something different because by this time I'd got interested in this idea of the English aesthetic. I recognised something in music that I really loved. I realised that I loved music that was rooted in this otherness. And by that I mean black music, African music, Indian music. There's a certain line, which is why I don't like calling music black music, because I think if you listen to gypsy music, if you listen to flamenco, if you listen to Irish Celtic music, North African music, master musicians of Jujuka, if you listen to certain Northern European gypsy music, if you listen to the blues and jazz, if you listen to Latin American music, all those are linked together by a certain thing. And then there's this other thing in music, which I call the English aesthetic. Those are the 2 things I like. I don't like anything else. I can't listen to Beethoven, because Beethoven's brilliant, but Beethoven does not have that otherness that I love. And it doesn't have the Englishness that I love. I could listen to Thomas Tallis or Elgar. I can listen to all of those. I can listen to Delius. Love Delius. I'm not very good with classical music that's not British. Except for American classical music like Aaron Copland. I love all that. And I love some of the romantic, and I like Ravel and Debussy. And I haven't put classical music on here. There's a fault straight off. Right. I haven't done classical music. It's too big a thing. I don't know where I'd put it. I think it would go between, it'd probably be it would have been number 8. Or maybe it would be somewhere around about pop music. That's where classical music would be. What was I talking about? Prog. So I put on Close to the Edge, I put on And You and I can remember listening to it and going, oh my God. Because sometimes we get so heavily involved in something. At that point in time, I know what it was. I was making all this garage and making all this dance music and doing all this sort of production. And my head was really into that. And then I go back to put And You and I on. And it was just, I can remember it now. And then that took me back to the prog. And then a couple of years later, I got offered the gig with IQ. And then suddenly I was coming back into the prog world, which for me was a bit like going, oh yeah, I remember all this, you know. I mean, I can remember when I was playing in IQ, we were doing our, the keyboard player, Martin Orford, who we knew as Widge, it was his last gig at Montreal Prog Fest. It was named something like that. And on the bill with them was the big, is it called Musical Box? The big Genesis tribute. And the singer was there, so the IQ guy says, "Shall we, do you want to come out and it's Widge's last gig? Do you want to come out and we'll do Watcher of the Skies?" And that was decided in the dressing room. So I get through the gig and then I think, what's going to happen now? And I can remember them because if you're in IQ, it goes without saying that you can just play Watcher of the Skies at the drop of a hat. And I wasn't like that. I had a rough idea. I knew it started by going. That's all I really had to go on. And I can remember trying to busk my way in front of 2,000 people through Watcher of the Skies, which I sort of got away with. Nobody said anything. Prog is not my number one, but I do love it. Now, the band that I think represents prog is Yes. And when I did my 30 progressive rock bands, they came out number one, and I thought that was correct. But prog's not my number. It's not my number one. It's not my number two and my number three even. At number three, I've actually got funk. I like funk more than prog. I just do. If something's really funky, I like it. If it's funky, I like it. It's really simple. With prog, it's going to do certain things and have certain things. And I go, I don't like that bloke's voice. Or, this doesn't ever get to that second gear. It's too doomy. And this one's too, up its own arse or whatever. All these things that I can critique with prog. But if something's funky, I love it. I love Jamiroquai because they're really funky. I absolutely love Jamiroquai. Play That Funky Music, White Boy. Who did that? Can't even remember. That's an amazing track. If that comes on, I just love it. The guy that's going to represent funk for me is an absolute giant in terms of my listening, and it's James Brown. You're now looking at James Brown. I hardly ever talk about James Brown on this channel. But see, I have listened to probably James Brown, Curtis Mayfield, Stevie Wonder, Parliament Funkadelic, Slave, Ohio Players, Earth, Wind and Fire. I have listened to all those bands more than I have listened to some of the more obscure prog bands. I have listened to the Ohio Players far more than I have listened to Caravan, for example. I have listened to Rufus and Shaka Khan and the following Shaka Khan albums far more and know them far better than Camel. This is turning into like a dirty, what's it called? When you go down the church and you have to talk to the priest. Confessions. It's like confessions of a prog YouTuber, isn't it? At number two, I've got jazz rock fusion, which I really do love. I think I love, if you look at rock music, heavy metal guitar music, if you look at like prog and then funk, jazz fusion covers all of that. Absolutely all of that. This channel really didn't start out as prog. It started out as a jazz fusion channel, and I was talking to them about the Mavish Orchestra. If I hadn't been bored that one afternoon in COVID, I was sat in here and I didn't feel like playing the drums or doing any more music production. I thought, I'm going to do one of them ranking videos, stick it on my YouTube. I did that entirely because I just fancied doing it. I fancied getting all the Mavish Orchestra albums out and, which one do I like best and which one do I like worse? I enjoyed doing that and I enjoyed talking about it. And then when I did it, I can remember Walter Kolosky, who had written the Mavish New book, he put a comment on it saying, this guy knows what he's talking about. And I thought, I didn't know that. Do I know what I'm talking about? I don't know. Even now it doesn't feel like I know what I'm talking about most of the time. I love jazz rock fusion and I really have studied that style and I know about that. And most obscure jazz rock, when you get into the weeds with jazz rock fusion, except for British jazz rock fusion, Isodope and Backdoor and all that. So I know them though, and I've listened to them. It's more than I can say about krautrock, which I haven't got a bloody clue about. So I never hear about it. But number one, oh yeah, of course, sorry. As you can see, fusion's represented by the Mahavishnu Orchestra, the greatest band of all time. Number one is jazz. And I started off listening to jazz as a kid. My dad played me tons of jazz. This record collection here is my record collection. I stopped buying records round about 30 years ago. So this is my record collection, but embedded in here are my dad's albums that I was brought up listening to. Albums like this, they're Dave Brubeck Quartet, right? This is what I was brought up listening to. Thank God, because I never had that difficulty with jazz like everyone else did. My dad had put jazz records on, and I was a little, like 3 or 4. You know what's going on, Dad? And Dad would explain. My dad would explain the jazz to me, and I started to realise how incredible these musicians were. I'm the most comfortable listening to jazz. I never have to work. It's not like acoustic songwriter. I never have to work at jazz. I can listen to any jazz. I could listen to Louis Armstrong, Jelly Roll Morton. I could listen to Big Spiderbeck. I could put that in the car and I'd be happy. As soon as I hear it, I feel comfortable. You know, I've had Ella Fitzgerald on in the car all week, and Stefan Grappelli. All stuff that my dad brought me up on. And jazz seemed to be my starting point. I think the reason I got into heavy metal, then I got into heavy rock. I bought a Deep Purple album, Deep Purple in concert, which is like a bunch of BBC recordings. And I remember recognising it because they were improvising on it so much and thinking, that sounds like jazz, I get this. And I could sit there and enjoy Deep Purple in a way I couldn't enjoy Iron Maiden. That thing that my dad gave me, that there's so many of his records. There's also a bunch of classical records peppered throughout here that are my dad's as well. But let's see if we can pull out some of my dad's. I think they're going to be more in this part here, perhaps. Let's see what we've got. There's one of my dad's. Night Train, Oscar Peterson. You know what I love about this video? What's been great about this video is at one point I'm talking about Zeppelin, then I've been talking about Public Enemy, and then I pull an album out like this, and some of the people who've come here who aren't jazz fans, they're prog fans, and they go, what the hell's Andy? This is like if you're not a jazz fan, you want to go check an album out, this is Oscar Peterson, one of the most virtuoso musicians that ever lived, in a piano trio. It's not avant-garde. They just play. They do blues on here. You know, they do Night Train. It's all blues on here. This is a monster album, I tell you. It's an absolute monster. Right, I grew up with that. I can hear it now. I can picture it's 1973, and I'm sat there on the rug in front of the gas fire trying to keep warm because we've got no central heating. And my dad sat there smoking in the house because you could back then. Right, so he's sat there smoking. We got one light on, or maybe a candle, because you want to save the electrics. And my dad's smoke is swirling up in the room, right? And there's nothing on the TV. There's nothing on the TV. And my dad's got in a mood. Nothing on this television. So he's flung the Radio Times across the room, and he's gone over and he's picked up Night Train by Oscar Peterson. And I'm sat there looking at my dad, my late dad, sat there smoking with his smoke swirling, and hearing bang, bang, and it went to right. I could hear it. It's in my body. Jazz is number one for me. Jazz will always be number one for me. There's something about it I absolutely love. I can listen to free jazz. I can listen to Albert Ayler, what's he called? Archie Shepp, Anthony Braxton. I just love jazz. I can listen to it all. Absolutely all. I love all jazz. I've never had this thing going, ooh, I don't really like that person. I'm not a massive fan of Charlie Mingus, for example. I'm not listening to him that much. I got some Mingus albums. If I put them on, they'll just blow me away. Isabel's Table Dance going to blow me away. Can't think of any jazz I don't like. I like all the West Coast. I just love jazz. I love jazz. Come on, Dad. My dad's not here anymore, but he's being thought of. I mean, there's all this sort of stuff as well. Frank Sinatra sings Cole Porter. Oh, here's one of my dad's favourites. One of my dad's favourite records. Stan Kenton. Stan Kenton was a big deal in the 1950s, you know. Really, really popular. You know, people don't realise this or remember it. But pre-rock and roll, Stan Kenton was a big artist, especially amongst the clever teenagers. Of course, we don't talk about him anymore because he was a bit dodgy, wasn't he? So I'm not going to say anymore. Don't get me channel. You know. Oh, look at this. Here's another one. And my dad. These are all so old. Look how old this is. Look at this. That is 1960s at least, if not 1950s. Columbia Records. Look at the label. Look at this. And look who's on this one. I'll show you it in a minute once I got this back in here. At some point my dad's taped it up with masking tape. Look at that. Jazz Giants. Stan Getz, Jerry Mulligan, Harry Edison, Louis Bellson, and the Oscar Peterson Trio. That is my youth, those artists there. And look how cool the cover is. Oh. I'm going to give you a bit of jazz with the guitar. I shouldn't leave my guitar down by the video because I have the propensity to pick it up. I'm not a good enough guitarist to try and attempt to do what I'm going to do now because I haven't planned this, as you well know. But I'm going to do Summertime, I think. Let's see what we can do. And that's what's in my system, you know. Oh, try my best there. A little bit of jazz for you to finish off the top of the list. Don't judge me. If you like this video, like it. If you want to see some more, subscribe. If you want to become a patron, you can. And that will be a great thing. If you become a patron, you can support me and get some guitar lessons. If you want to support me in another way, you can put a donation into the PayPal tip jar. I hope you like this one. Managed to keep it under the hour. God, I don't half go on, don't I? See you on the next one.